Well. Looks like the champ is here. Hey, do you know you can just buy pro wrestling title belt fanny packs? It's pretty good. Pretty good. We truly live in a golden age. Anyway, I interviewed a couple of funny people about their love of the WWE, including somebody who has written for the WWE. What? It's written? Oh, it's still real to me, damn it. And all those other references. This is a fun interview. I hope you enjoy it. And also, wrestling is very good. I don't always enjoy WWE. I'm more of an AEW guy. But hey, no shade to the people that like it. There's enough wrestling out there for everybody. Okay, bye! And by that I mean hi! And by that I mean just watch it.
Welcome to Don't Mind If I Don't. I'm your host, Aaron Gold. This is the show where I don't like things, and people tell me why I'm wrong, and then hopefully I learn something and stop living in this goddamn hole. Today's episode is very special. We're doing the WWE. I'm a former fan and was on again, off again in my fandom, but if there's anyone that can bring me around, it's these two guests. Starting with, we've got a booker for the Comedy Wrestling League here in New York City, UCBW, and the host of 404ing It, Pat Baer, is here.
Hello. I'm a comedy wrestling fan and in general wrestling fan for all my life. And I was a lapsed fan as well in the mid-2000s, which is the dark period if you grew up in the Attitude Era. But I'm back and I've been enjoying it for years again.
Yeah, post-Attitude is when I came back, after Attitude.
Yeah.
But more on that in a little bit. Our other guest today is a former producer of UCBW and a former writer for the WWE. Zach Linder is here.
That's true. That's true. And at the WWE, I interviewed both Donald Trump and Hulk Hogan, so I'm well versed in both wrestling and racism.
And we're not sure that those two are not the same people. They've never been seen in the same room at the same time.
They definitely have been.
I don't know.
Yeah, they probably have.
Photoshop.
In a ring, I would bet.
Yeah, that's totally possible.
WrestleMania 4 or 5 at Trump Plaza, Atlantic City. Anyway.
Yeah.
We can get
up
to
on
that.
your dates.
Well, and we can get into this, Aaron, but I would say that I don't know how much I love the WWE right now, but what I do love is wrestling history.
Okay.
And I think a really interesting way to watch, for example, Monday Night Raw each week is through the prism of the history of wrestling and how it's this one continuous narrative.
That I respect. Like, I really dug, what was his name? The guy who wrote Chronicle.
Max Landis?
Max Landis' his video, Wrestling Isn't Wrestling, I thought was wonderful.
A great video, a controversial figure.
Yeah.
In general.
People do not like him.
Yeah.
Triple H or Max Landis, or both.
Either or.
Triple H and Max Landis have a lot in common, Pat.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's begrudging respect, but then there are moments where you're just like, oh, well, all right, well, I'm off for a while.
Both a part of famous families.
Indeed.
Right? With intimidating father figures.
Yeah, totally true.
Both have ridiculous hair. So, Pat, why do you like pro wrestling?
So,
or WWE, to be more specific.
Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about the specifics of WWE because I think Zach will probably talk in the generalities of wrestling. So I'm a guy that, grew up loving superheroes and wasn't really into sports, but saw like the 80s wrestling, and I was never super into it. I didn't have friends who were into wrestling in the 80s. I'm one of those kids, like I was born in 1980, so I didn't really care about Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage and that era. But when I was 16, suddenly WCW becomes a bigger thing, and then in the next 4 years, the explosion where people you would never expect to love wrestling suddenly love it. And I kind of got swept into that. I was the right age to think that Sting dressed like the Crow was the best thing in wrestling.
It was awesome.
I was the Monday Night Wars. I picked a side. I was also what
side did you pick?
So I started with WCW, but then I switched to WWF.
Gotcha.
Why? At what point?
I think it was Stone Cold. I think Stone Cold's turn got me. And then also WCW had a thing where they were really, it seemed like the NWO was going to be awesome, but then it was a certain point where it was I think it got away from them. I think NWO became cool and they didn't want to make them the good guys. So then there was this thing where it's well, the bad guys are too cool and no, there's like, I guess I like DDP. Okay, DDP 1. Okay.
You're a big DDP yoga guy.
Yeah, I mean,
You're big into DDP yoga.
I respect it. So, and then I had a lot of friends in the tape trading business and fandom for both wrestling and anime and all that stuff in the 90s. So I started seeing tapes of ECW shows and so then when those people started showing up on both brands, I was like, oh, I know who those people are.
Right.
And then I was a Laps fan when the companies became one company. And I tried really hard in the early 2000s to like it and didn't. And then I kind of got out of it. And then actually UCBW, which is our comedy wrestling league, started up. And we've been doing 10 years now. So we started up again. I started that by being a referee for that because I was friends with Charlie Todd, who created it.
I've seen a lot of your characters. Watermelon Cop.
Yes, I've done a variety of characters.
That's my favorite of yours, Pat. Watermelon Cop.
Wait, did I get it wrong? I know it was Beach Cop.
So Beach Cop is a UCBW thing. I was going to let it go, but it's fine.
Oh, no, yeah.
Watermelon
Cop
Police
was on,
Officer.
Chris Gethard show.
Watermelon Police Officer was a character I did on the Chris Gethard show. He is a...
So I'm not super wrong.
You just had the wrong context.
Yeah.
It also, there's such a weird... but I've done police officers.
I'm embarrassed.
It's all right. And then, I've had a couple wrestling characters. I currently have a wrestling character in the show besides booking.
Who?
Right now, I am Beach Cop again. Yes, it happened at our last pay-per-view. Transit Cop, who's been my heel character for about 2 years, who was Beach Cop, but started going by his first name, Transit, instead of his middle name, Beach, as if he will, spoiler alert, in February when we return, he'll announce that he has legally changed his name back to Beach Cop. But that is my
You heard
wrestling
it here
character.
first.
A lot of bureaucracy involved with that paperwork.
Whole lot of bureaucracy. It's going to take months in the off season. But I just kind of got back into loving it. And the current product, like, I wouldn't say, I mean, I don't watch the 9 hours I could watch of it weekly, but I do watch about 3 hours. And then there's another hour that'll come in that I'll have to watch. So it'll be up
You
to
a Raw guy or SmackDown?
I'm a SmackDown guy.
Gotcha.
Which sucks because I also love the Cruiserweight division and what they've done with it. And I'll probably get into that a little bit.
Sure.
Cruiserweights
were one of the reasons I got into them in the first place.
And the Cruiserweight Classic, which is on the WWE Network, is what I would suggest watching because it's some... There's a couple like old school people that you're like, oh, okay, I can identify with that. Oh, Yoshitatsu, I remember him. But then there's a bunch of people from America and international that you don't know.
Yoshitatsu was not in the Cruiserweight Classic.
Wasn't Yoshitatsu in the Cruiserweight? Yeah.
Are you thinking of Yoshihiro Tajiri? Are you thinking of Tajiri?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah, with the
Tajiri,
tarantula.
that's right. Tajiri came back. I thought Yoshitatsu was in the first round.
No.
And he lost like in the first round.
I could be totally wrong, but I don't think that's...
I'll admit that I might be wrong. But yeah, Tajiri and Brian Kendrick had been around and came back for it. They have a few people that are on their roster that did it, that are in their developmental league, were in there. And then just a bunch of people that are just great wrestlers.
Right.
That some of which just signed up for the tournament, some of which are now in development or now also on TV. But because it's a bunch of people that the audience doesn't know all at once, they have to do like really simple, easy storytelling. Like,
What? Was that a truck that just had an aneurysm?
No, I walk around with an air horn guy.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Tell him to pipe that down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to do really quick storytelling, like, oh, this guy's a bad guy because he doesn't want the audience to applaud for him, or he did he didn't accept the handshake, and so they have to do the really quick storytelling. But it's also just about the wrestling, and it's like, this is the only professional wrestler from this country. It is a new thing, and he's not great, but that's cool. And check out this luchador, and check out this luchador, and check out this British guy is different from that British guy. And look at this guy's mustache. He's the gentleman. Oh, he's fighting dirty, though. And it's like everything I love about wrestling, like in a 10 episode...
timely manner.
Yeah, like an hour-long episode, 10 episodes. And now they're in wrestling. Like they've moved, some of them moved on, and the division's going to have its own hour-long show on the network that will be like right before SmackDown, as part of SmackDown. And then, so that's been the thing that I'm like, people are like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm going to start watching it. I'm like, watch the 205, watch the cruiserweights, because that's like, to me, one of my favorite parts of wrestling right now.
I might actually have to dip into that in a moment. But Zach, why do you like wrestling or did? Or WWE, I should specify.
Aaron, I'm going to answer that in 3 ways. If that's
Okay.
So I can go through my timeline of becoming and being a wrestling fan like Pat did, but then I'll also talk about why I do like wrestling now and what I like about it, and also why I don't like wrestling, because I think to see all the perspectives might help you like it in certain ways, right?
Sure. I definitely have my points for why I'm not a fan anymore.
Great. Okay, and that's great, and I might agree with many of them, to be honest. Okay,
Me as well.
So I remember the first time I ever watched wrestling. My childhood best friend Evan Rabinowitz invited me over to his house to watch the 1992 Royal Rumble. Okay, and I went over there, and that has become a legendary event. And the Royal Rumble match itself from that event is now considered to be the very best of all the Rumble matches.
Who won that one?
So that was the one. The title had been vacated. So it was not for a title shot or for any kind of glory. It was for the vacant world title.
Right.
And Ric Flair won. And he had just jumped over from WCW. So it was kind of a big deal that here was this world champion from another organization coming over. That was really one of the first times that you had big stars switching from one company to another. Which obviously happened a lot down the line in the later 90s. But
he was one of the first ones.
He was one of at least maybe the first very high-profile one.
He was high-profile enough that they mentioned it, where sometimes people would jump ship, but they would do a new character and they wouldn't talk about it.
One of the best times they did mention it before he debuted. So they had decided that Bobby Heenan was going to be Flair's mouthpiece.
Gotcha.
Even though Flair could talk very well for himself.
Flair is a mouthpiece.
It's true, but I think they wanted to introduce him without introducing him. So they had Heenan kind of be his surrogate. And there's this great clip you can go and watch online with Heenan standing next to Gorilla Monsoon, and they're chatting, and Heenan brings up kind of from below the frame the WCW world title, which a lot of fans refer to as the big gold belt, in quotes, right? And it was this beautiful design that it has now become...
We've got a replica over there.
That looks exactly like it.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like it if you made it out of Flex Seal rubber.
Yeah, and Play-Doh.
So Heenan brings up the belt and says, this is the belt of the real world champion. And Gorilla Monsoon says, I know Hulk Hogan. I know the real world champion, and that's not Hogan's belt. And Heenan replies, comparing this belt to Hogan's belt is like comparing ice cream to horse manure. But anyway,
that was a classy diss.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal. He jumped over and he won the title. And if you look at the roster of who was in that Rumble match, it is this veritable who's who of Hall of Famers at this point. It is an incredible litany of talent in that match. So that was the first time I ever watched wrestling. And then I fell out of it. I was really young in 92. I was 8 years old. And I fell out of it. And I got back into it about a year later. When Yokozuna became the champion at WrestleMania 9, which is a very weird wrestling event. And I continued watching it kind of through 93 up until kind of where Lex Luger turned into a good guy and body slammed Yokozuna on the deck of the USS Intrepid.
Which is one of the most American things that has ever happened.
I would argue the most American thing.
That was such a beautifully dumb, great... I mean, wrestling at its best is when it is stupidly patriotic, where you are cheering for...
I don't know if I agree with that.
Because
I don't agree with
so
that.
So it's not to say that, like, it's nationalism, but it's this weird thing where everyone in the audience, when the audience gets on board with a dumb idea, when you are chanting USA, USA, and you are backing a Canadian-born wrestler who lives in New York, like, that is stupid. When you're like, this team represents America, and you're like, It's The Undertaker and Mick Foley and
Are they both
Stone
Canadian?
Cold. No, but
Oh.
they don't represent, their gimmicks aren't America. It
True.
just happens that they're wrestling the Hart Foundation, so they're the American team, and you're like, all right. And a Minnesotan-born man can become the biggest foreign heel in the world, and you're like, okay, I guess. And then his sons, who have his name as their last name, can be American heroes, but they're called the Von Erichs because they're the.
Pat's going deep.
I'm going deep.
Yeah, no, that is deep, and that's
but like
that's
it's all when but people jump on board and go, okay.
I'll tell you, like one of the things I did like about wrestling were the crowds and how the crowds got into it. That was one of the things that kept me into it. But things that got me out of it, and I should mention this: every topic we talk about gets ranked on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being total ambivalence, could take it or leave it. 10 being blood-curdling hatred. WWE. I started out loving WCW just because I was a young, nerdy Jewish kid, and then I heard about Goldberg, this undefeated wrestler who was a ridiculously badass Jew. And I was so young and without culture, I'm like, Jews can be wrestlers? And I got so into that.
About Goldberg.
In a second, because, like, you know, I fell in and out of love with wrestling so many times. Right now, I'd say it's at about a 5. It became so goddamn predictable, and the WWE took some of my favorite wrestlers like Rey Mysterio Jr., who was this amazing cruiserweight when I was younger, who would do these amazing things, and they made him so formulaic and boring. And that's what WWE kept doing. It takes great characters and then make them boring, and then takes boring characters and continued to make them boring. It seems like it snuffs out the light of all this the beauty of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with
I
that.
don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But let me just continue with kind of my fandom. If that's
Sure.
Okay. So I'm watching in 92, 93. I fall out of it. You know, I go through puberty. I discover girls. Wrestling takes a back seat, right? And then I get back in kind of. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I watched in high school when it was super, super popular, right?
Yeah.
The era that you're talking about when Goldberg was around. I was never a WCW fan. I was almost always a WWF at that time fan.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had just gotten back into it. I was maybe a fan for a couple months, and I became really attached to Mankind, Mick Foley, right? And I remember watching him win the world title for the first time on Monday Night Raw.
That was against The Rock, right?
Against The Rock, exactly. And I remember crying in my parents' living room watching this. And I watched through the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and that's when it began to take a back seat. And I became, I was in high school, and then almost all through high school and college, I did not watch. Then late in college, now this is after working there for a number of years, you learn that this is a common pattern. Late in high school, late in college, early 20s, I started watching it again. This is probably 2005, 2006. And it's very common for someone to miss those years and then jump back in when they're a little older, can watch things with a little bit more of an analytical eye, not be super invested in it, and not suspend all disbelief, and you're able to watch it with this certain measure of cynical distance, right?
And that's what I did when I started getting into TNA, because I loved Christopher Daniels.
Well, now I know why you're not a wrestling fan anymore.
Well, because TNA
Because
died
you were
a
watching
slow, horrible death.
Well, it's TNA, which is
When it was great, when it
it's
was
died
had
a-
X Division, that was amazing.
It's died 1,000 deaths.
It has.
And it's attempted to reinvigorate itself, and like at every turn, it has made stars out of people that probably never could. It is been amazing to watch people that could have been stars there that now have kind of reinvigorated their careers on the indie scene, or in the case of Bobby Roode, just by going to NXT of all places,
Or
the
AJ
developmental
Styles,
league,
who's
or
now
AJ
in
Styles,
WWE
who's
finally.
getting his run.
Yeah.
Who maybe also partly to doing Japan and having a resurgence there, but like, oh man, TNA.
so.
Separate. It's
So
almost a separate podcast.
I started watching
Yeah.
again 2005, 2006, and at that time, it was right around the time that UCBW was starting, and we were all kind of hanging out, talking about wrestling, backstage at UCB. So we all kind of got reinvested at around the same time. And I started watching Raw every week, and I started being a more consistent fan again with that little bit more of like an analytical view. And that happened for, about 5 years or so. And then I got hired by WWE. And I worked there for 4 years, from 2011 to 2015.
Best years of your life.
And, well, I had some fun moments. It was an interesting learning experience. And I was there for a long time. 4 years is quite a while for someone to stick around.
Yeah.
And in that time, I really became invested. I'd been interested in it before, but I really became heavily invested in the history of wrestling. And that sort of became my specialty working at WWE and writing stories for WWE.com. My specialty sort of became interviewing talent, writing stories about very niche pieces of wrestling history. And I became very, very interested in that. And I would still watch Raw every week and the pay-per-views we would cover at WWE.com. So I was watching the pay-per-views every month. So I always thought that working there would sort of kill my love for it. And that did not happen. What did happen very subconsciously is when I left WWE, almost instantly, I stopped watching wrestling.
Yeah.
And I did not even say to myself, you know what, I'm going to take a break. But something about no longer working there, I was instantly disinterested. And I didn't watch for about 6 months after I left.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You're walking away from that world. Actually, something else you said really resonated with me, the emotional moment that you've had watching wrestling sometimes. I remember one of the most excited moments of my childhood when I was watching WrestleMania 20. Because at the time, before the tragedy of all that happened, Benoit was my favorite wrestler. And seeing him beat Shawn Michaels and Triple H in that 3-person match, I was screaming. I wrestling had never gotten that kind of reaction out of me before. I don't think that ability to get that invested in it again exists inside of me anymore.
So do you think that the Benoit series of events really ruined a lot of your love of wrestling?
I was out of wrestling by the time that happened, but
okay.
When I found out about it, I was definitely downtrodden.
Now, something I don't understand about wrestling fans on the internet. One of many things I don't understand about wrestling fans on the internet.
Really, any fan of anything on the internet.
A lot of people you'll see on the famous wrestling Reddit board and other places where wrestling is discussed online. A lot of people will always bring up Benoit or be upset that Benoit is not mentioned in like a list of all-time greats, either wrestlers or matches or what have you. And I never understood that.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, WWE did the right thing by wiping this guy from their history.
No, I think they needed to.
He has zero right to ever be mentioned again. This guy murdered his family, and fans are crying out, where's Benoit? Shut up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
Every time a WWE game comes out, it is always amazing to me that the person that runs social media for the company, like THQ or what have you, doesn't quit as soon as a new game gets announced, because they are flooded with requests for Benoit to be DLC. And it's this thing where it's not that fan you can't give a good argument
to.
You can't say, yes, the other people you're listing have gone in and out of favor with WWE. Yes, it is weird that some of those people are also included in games and marketing when they have said and done horrible things. But they are not like the same. It's not the same.
The man killed his wife and children.
And saying that someone that has been convicted of drug charges, like equating all of those people, or being incredibly racist, including all those people together with him, it doesn't make a better case for you. It just makes a better case that, they should also not be included.
Yeah, agreed.
So it's a thing where it's just like, the fan, I would say that sometimes fans do actually ruin a good thing.
Oh, 100%.
But I will say this. So my big thing when it comes to wrestling, if I was going to say why you should watch the WWE right now, is what could be terrible for them could also be great for them, and that is the brand split. They've done another.
They did it again?
They did it again. They pretty recently did it again where
people on WWE, on Raw stay on Raw, people on SmackDown stay on SmackDown.
Yeah, and then a couple times a year they face each other.
Right.
It's added more pay-per-views, which if you want to watch all of the product is terrible. But if you're like, you know what, even though Raw has this person that I like and this person that I like, SmackDown has more of the people I like, so I'm going to pick SmackDown because it's 2 hours, and they have a pay-per-view, whatever, and then I can see that.
SmackDown's only 2 hours?
SmackDown is right now 2 hours.
And Raw is 3.
Raw is 3, and then like Talking Smack is their after show on the network, which is like actually good.
Pat, you want to explain what the network is?
So WWE has a network. So basically, they took the idea that a lot of premium subscription services have done, which is. If you pay us this service, you'll get our pay-per-views included, which already is a huge deal.
Yeah.
Instead of
those
having
are
to
like,
do that,
what, $30 a pop?
Those are $30, $40, $60 for the big ones. So you get that for $10 a month, or they might go tiered packaging at some point. Right now it's $10. You get this back catalog of incredible old stuff, like all of WCW's pay-per-views, all of ECW's pay-per-views, all of WWE when they were WWF pay-per-views, all these specials, original programming that is very hit or miss, NXT, which is their developmental.
I've heard amazing things about NXT.
NXT go through waves. I think it might be on a little bit of a downturn right now.
All
but
right,
like,
well, that was
but,
going to be like the one thing that I would have watched.
Just to
but
simplify
also
it-
incredible.
Just to simplify it, it's a streaming service for pro wrestling.
And
it's,
there's-
it's Netflix for wrestling, and they have an enormous back catalog of nearly any past program you want to watch, and also a lot of the premier live programs will air live on it as well.
So they've got some pre-shows and after-shows for both shows. But because of the brand split, you can dial in a program within the world and be like, I'm a Raw guy. So that's what I watch. I watch the Raw pay-per-views. I'll watch the joint ones, I guess. I'll watch 3 hours of Raw every week, or the condensed version of like fast-forwarding, however you want to do it. But the nice thing right now is because I kind of lean towards SmackDown because it feels like they're attempting to do a bit of a different program. They're the show that can break the mold because SmackDown has been on different nights, on different networks. It's the show that made Edge a star. It's the show
Never
that
liked
made...
Edge.
And, I understand that. It's a show that made Rey Mysterio a world champion. And for all that, like, yes...
I'm nodding for the listener.
My big issue with professional wrestling is that because they're on every week and because they're on, they can't let those wrestlers get a chance to try new things because they're doing, instead of like, in the old days, the territory days where you see a guy and then you see him again next year, like they're doing the same match in every town.
Yeah.
You just didn't see that because you weren't all watching it at once. They can't do that now. So when like John Cena starts doing a off the second rope jump back into a stunner, you're like, hey, that's a new move from John Cena. And it's shitty to get excited about that if you want to see like always cool new things. Like that's shitty that like he's got his 6 moves. And it's just who he's fighting is different.
Right.
Like I get that. And I would agree with that.
That ruins the mystique of it because like part of what was so amazing to me, especially with, TNA's X division, is seeing people do ridiculous things. I watched, you sent me, Zach, you sent me a list of the 100 best wrestling matches of all time. And I watched the number 1, which was Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania.
You're referring to WWE.com. If you go and Google the 100 matches to see before you die.
Right.
That was one of it was the biggest feature I worked on when I was at WWE. It was the biggest feature in the history of the website. And that match you're talking about is unbelievable. I was there for that match. I was actually working for USA Network at the time. This is before I worked for WWE. And USA Network flew me down because they're a partner of the WWE, obviously. Right. And I remember sitting there, and I was with some executives, and we were all just... Our minds were blown at that match. As far as I'm concerned, that is the single greatest match of all time.
And I liked it a lot. I mean, this is probably going to be a bit controversial for any wrestling fan listening. I never liked Shawn Michaels. I feel like he looks like the guy you come home and find your wife is cheating on you with. Like he just struck me as a total asshole.
I have never, in all my years watching wrestling and meeting wrestling fans, I have never heard anybody say that they don't like Shawn Michaels.
That's me.
That is the first time I've ever heard that. He is widely regarded as one of the all-time greats.
It's this comment. He's a great wrestler, and he's incredibly charismatic, and he presents himself in a way that, like, when he's a face, you get it. When he's a heel, you get it.
That I'll give you. He's been, when he was a heel, I didn't like him for the right reasons.
Same
with Jericho.
I think
Jericho, amazing on the mic. Whenever he's a heel, I don't like him for the right reasons.
You said you didn't like Edge before, and I'm betting it was for the same things. I'm betting you were getting worked, brother.
Getting work?
Getting worked.
Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, but also, like, part of the reason I didn't like Edge was because of the whole stuff that went down with, Matt Hardy's marriage falling apart. And that's not any one person's fault.
And also,
that was all done to make you hate him. You understand that?
I mean, the information you got about that, was because, because enough people were like, Matt, this should be a storyline. Like, it's a real thing that happened, but also, what if... And the internet's talking about it, and then our dumb live call-in show we shouldn't be doing keeps bringing it up. So let's make it a storyline so we can all make money off of it.
I'm betting you didn't much care about Edge until that happened, and then you really started to hate him, right?
I don't remember. Truth be told, like Gesundheit, Grant. I don't remember. I remember thinking that he and Christian were entertaining as a tag team.
Yeah, as a tag team, but as a singles wrestler, he had not really hit it big, and he was really missing the mark. And he did not really get a rocket on his back until that whole controversy went down. And that controversy, let's be clear, that was by design. That was done by...
Using the controversy was by design.
How much do you know is true about that?
I'm from what you've just said, I'm assuming less than I thought.
So you always have to believe when it comes to pro wrestling that you're always being, and I used this word before, you're always being worked.
Okay.
Right? You can never think that what you're seeing is real in any way. When wrestling is really good, and I can talk a little bit more about this later, but when wrestling is really good, it's when you don't know what's real and what's fake. When people say to me or to Pat, I'm sure, why do you like wrestling? It's fake, right? That's because wrestling has become known. It's a show, right? It's entertainment. They don't make any bones about that anymore.
Right.
So now they've had to come up with more interesting ways to get it to be compelling.
You know what? That's a fair point. I think part of it is the moral gray area so much of wrestling falls under. Whenever there's like a foreign wrestler, immediately bad guy. I think there is a sense of nationalism about it, and it's off-putting to me, like especially the way like I rewatch old stuff with JR screaming puppies like about women, and I'm just
Jerry,
like
that is Jerry the King Lawler.
Jerry the King Lawler. I'm sorry, JR. I always like
good old JR.
By God,
yeah.
But I feel like so much of wrestling appeals to the worst parts of us as Americans.
So. Yes,
and that's off-putting.
But also because because wrestling is still like
not to mention the objectification of women. Which has gotten better. It seems women are being taken seriously as wrestlers.
I'd actually say that's actually one of the biggest positives about the current product is that it is very feminist right now.
Yeah, it seems that
it is. To be specific, the division exists, obviously. WWE is incredibly slow in the regard of having mixed gendered matches. They always have been, and they probably always will be. But they're not calling they call wrestlers superstars, and for a long time they called the female division divas.
Yeah.
Now everyone is a superstar.
Good. Okay, good. That was one of the reasons I could feel a point being taken away from my rating system right now
and
because
the
of
divas as a brand still exist in the fact of like Total Divas and as a marketing tool, but the division is called the women's division. It is the women's both shows have their own women's belt. And while those divisions could be bigger and could be supplemented, and the same thing with, in 3 hours, it would be nice to have more than one women's match and one cruiserweight match. that is my issue with the fact that you have a 3-hour program and a third of it is dedicated to letting you know what happened in the first hour. But that's because people have sheets of paper that tell them that they have to do that. So the thing about appealing to everyone is that you have to appeal to everyone. The people that don't, that market themselves like, we're this kind of wrestling, can still exist, but WWE is not in the business of appealing to a certain wrestling fan. They attempt to appeal to all wrestling fans.
Right.
Like cruiserweights is to get me back in and to keep me paying for that because I'm not super into this thing. Or, well, Sami Zayn is awesome, so I'm going to keep watching because I think Sami Zayn rules. Or I think what Kevin Owens is doing with Chris Jericho right now is fantastic because so many of their heels are this weird thing where they want to be cool, and Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho don't care about being cool, which makes them the coolest.
Because Chris Jericho is cool. Like he's
got a great stupid gimmick that they might ruin again, like they do.
What's his gimmick now?
So right now, his best friend is Kevin Owens, who is the champion. He's the Universal Champion. And
that's
so
the SmackDown champion? Or
that is the Raw champion.
Gotcha.
So his gimmick is, this is my best friend. He had a little gimmick here where he had a list. He had a list of his grievances. But really, he's just this, like, even though he's so accomplished, like, his gimmick right now is that, like, my best friend is a champion, and it's very obvious that we are using each other.
I would argue that that's not his gimmick. I think
you don't think that's his gimmick?
No, I think you're talking about the specifics of the things he does on screen.
Okay.
But that's not what makes a gimmick. What is Chris Jericho's persona, right? Chris Jericho's current persona was really born organically, right? He had been coming back and forth, returning and leaving WWE and doing these stints, right? And in his most recent stint, he came back and he's in this rock band part-time as well. And he kind of, I think, fancies himself in real life this sort of cool rocker guy.
Yeah.
Right. And he would come back and it was very clear that he had gotten all these like weird tattoos, and he's now in his 40s. And he would come back and he'd wear these sort of like rock and roll scarves. And it was very clear that he was this older guy trying to be cool. Online and on Twitter during the show, people started referring to him as like cool dad Jericho, or like a dad who kind of like makes jokes that thinks he's real cool, right? And what you saw on screen is that transferring to his persona, and he has embraced that. So he came back as a good guy, and people hated him because he was kind of this faux cool guy, or so they believed, and he became that. And he became this bad guy who sort of thought he was cool, but better than you, kind of, right? And he became so good at doing that in a comic way that fans now eat it up. So it does this complete 360, right?
Kind of the way when Daniel Bryan tried to turn heel by chanting no, no, and the audience fucking loved that even more.
The audience loved it, right? The New Day is another example, which is this trio of black wrestlers that debuted as trying to say this is now the time for African American wrestlers in WWE, and they were doing it in sort of this heelish way, and the fans loved it, and over time they've become these unicorn loving fluorescent colored baby faces, which is the term for good guys.
They walk around with a trumpet, right?
Trombone.
Plays a trombone.
Xavier Woods can play the trombone, so they incorporated that. And the thing I love and hate about wrestling is that right now we're in a period where you can just be a good guy without ever doing anything good.
Yeah.
And there's no repercussions for it because I love dumb storyline stuff. So to me, it's like, so the New Day came in as like positive, the power of positive thinking, and they were positive, and they were there to be positive and the audience was just like, no, we don't like this. And they were like, oh, you don't like this? Well, we're positive, but we're going to be jerks about it. And then the audience was like, okay. And then they were like, we're having fun being jerks. And the audience was like, oh, we're having fun with you being jerks. And so they just became faces or good guys because the audience just like got on board with them. But they never had a moment where they were like, oh, we don't like you other bad guys, or like this person's getting beat up and we're going to save them. They've done that, but they never had a moment where they were like,
definitively.
And now
Stone Cold turned on somebody.
And now they're probably due to finally turn heel again because it's old. It's just gotten kind of old, and they have moments where they find moments.
I would highly doubt if they turn heel again. They sell too much merchandise for that.
Yeah,
which is something that WWE is very keenly aware of. But when Pat talks a lot about these specifics of what's on the show, you'd be hard pressed to hear me talk a lot about that, right? If you want me to sit here and say, here are the reasons that you need to watch Raw or SmackDown or all the pay-per-views or whatever's on the network every week, I can't sit here and do that. Watching Raw every week, a 3-hour program every Monday night, is a slog. And it's really hard to convince someone to do that and then watch another night of wrestling and then a pay-per-view where it all culminates, right? What I would say to you, if you want to be a wrestling fan, wrestling is not about watching the full show each week. You mentioned WrestleMania 20 before.
Yeah.
I mentioned Mankind winning the title back in 1999. Wrestling is about the moments.
Yeah, I was about to say, it seems like WWE has become the... Yeah, I'm not going to watch the full thing. I don't even have TV like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got, streaming services. But it seems like it is these moments. And the moments will pop up on my Facebook newsfeed, and I'll watch those. I watched, what was that? The one guy who enters with the violin.
Shinsuke Nakamura, who was a big star in Japan.
Yeah.
And was signed to WWE's developmental brand, which is called NXT.
Yeah. And I saw his intro in the NXT TakeOver in Brooklyn, which was wonderful. Like this weird friggin' guy who looks like he's coked out on something, but it's just so compelling to watch.
Yeah.
Those moments are great.
He's also a very unique talent. Very, very unique. And for a long time, wrestling was really looking for something different. It had become very stale, right? Which is, I bet, part of the reason that you stopped watching.
Yeah, almost entirely. It just becomes so stale and oftentimes also just preachy in the wrong ways. Or
it can be, but Nakamura came along.
Yeah.
And Nakamura really looks unlike anything that WWE has ever had. And I don't mean that he's one of their first Asian stars, which is unfortunate, but he also moves in a way that is very unlike how it seems WWE talent has been sort of instructed to move in a physical way. The only other guy recently that I've seen that is like that just is different was the early days of Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose has now also become very stale and
that's what
boring.
WWE does. It poisons wonderful things,
and part of it is,
and it also normalizes a lot of negative things. And to lead into that, you interviewed Donald Trump.
I did
at WWE, and I remember seeing the clip. It's shown up,
but I don't know if WWE ruined Donald Trump.
No,
I think he did that himself.
Trump ruined Donald Trump. I remember, I think it was a WrestleMania where Jesse Ventura came out and was like, I'll be running for president in 4 years. And he walks over to Donald Trump, who has a front row seat, and was like, so Donald, will I have your vote? And it was awkward for everyone because Donald lies to his face, and you could tell it was on the spot. But.
So you must have a big affinity in your heart for WrestleMania 20, because that's the same event where you talked about the Benoit title win.
I think so, yeah, because that was I can remember the pinnacle of me loving WWE.
Okay.
But I remember seeing Donald Trump years and years ago with that whole DX thing of him pummeling Vince McMahon, and you can watch that clip, and Donald Trump can't even fake throw a punch.
Right.
There's no way Vince would anywhere close to lose that fight.
Wrestling in general, and specifically WWE, it always feels like this second-class citizen when it comes to entertainment. Wrestling, because people that love real sports look down on it. People that love
real acting,
or even though because it's this thing of wrestling's fake, blah, 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 all this stuff. So when anyone interesting likes wrestling, the WWE in particular loves that.
That's true.
If you are an actor, if you are in
Jon Stewart,
Jon Stewart watching wrestling because his kids are into it. Oh, we got to bring Jon Stewart in. We're going to give him a chair and have him do some stuff. Music stars. If it's like, I mean, I still think it's kind of cool, but like, it's like, well, your cousin is Snoop Dogg, and so he's going to rap as you come to the ring. Yeah, of course. Like,
that I actually like,
but
because that's kitschy in the good way.
But that also leads to like Donald Trump will come and be on our thing because we've done this and this, and people will tune in because that's a spectacle. Wrestling is a spectacle. It has heart and it has desire and has people that love to make it, but also it is a thing where it's like, it is obsessed with ratings and keeping things going and going to new markets and exploding in old ones and beating the competition and all that. Like, it's still fueled by that.
It's still a monopoly.
So,
it's still it does come across as soulless a lot of the times. Like the wonderful moments that happen, half of those moments seem to be not on purpose.
So let me talk a little bit about Trump's involvement with WWE and what the history is behind that. So
and you've got a clip from interviewing him.
And then we can play the my brief interview with him, right? But just to set that up, so WWE's premier event is WrestleMania. It's their Super Bowl, right? We've mentioned that word a few times already, the WrestleMania brand name. And when it started, it was very much a very touch-and-go kind of event, and the first one was a massive success, and they continued doing it. And WrestleMania 3 set this indoor attendance record. That's the famous Hulk Hogan Andre the Giant match, right?
Where he scoop slams Andre the Giant.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Following that, Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE, needed to do something to continue the enormity of WrestleMania. And so he goes to his old friend Donald Trump. They had been introduced a number of times in sort of the New York nightlife circles, right? And Trump agreed to host WrestleMania 4 at the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, which in those days, the boardwalk of Atlantic City was considered a premier destination.
Right.
And so WrestleMania 4 was hosted in Atlantic City, a famous event where Macho Man Randy Savage won the title for the first time. It was such a success, they did WrestleMania 5 at Atlantic City. That was the famous Macho Man Randy Savage versus Hulk Hogan match. And that really established this relationship between Vince and Donald Trump, right? You mentioned the angle where Trump pummeled Vince, right? So that took place in the
pummeled in air quotes, but yeah.
That took place in the 2000s. They introduced Donald Trump as this sort of babyface figure to the villainous Mr. McMahon, and they each had a surrogate wrestler compete on their behalf, and whoever lost that match, whoever's wrestler lost that match would get their head shaved live in the ring. And of course, Trump's hair, big topic of conversation. And Vince had this beautiful coif at the time. And of course, Vince lost. And there's this great scene of Trump kind of shaving Vince's head in the middle of the ring at WrestleMania in this enormous stadium in Detroit. Following that, a couple of years later, they did this huge storyline where Donald Trump purchased Raw. And he owned it for, I think, 3 weeks. It was about a 3 or 4 week storyline where one edition of Raw was branded Trump Raw, and it was aired commercial free thanks to Donald Trump, right? And then Vince ended up buying it back from Trump. And then a number of years later, Donald Trump, and here's where I met him, Donald Trump was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. So the WWE does have a Hall of Fame. It's not a physical location. They're building one in South Florida, or Central Florida, I guess Orlando. And
just another reason why I'm looking forward to our Florida episode. But yeah.
So and every year, the night before WrestleMania, they will do this enormous induction ceremony. Where they will induct about half a dozen personalities into their Hall of Fame.
Right.
And each year they induct a celebrity inductee. And a lot of these celebrity inductees have been, candidly not worthy. Have made maybe one appearance. Drew Carey was inducted one year because he made a single appearance in a Royal Rumble.
I'm assuming Stephen Amell will at some point be inducted.
He's done a couple things, that's really recent, but, who knows? But all things considered, as much as I hate to say this, Donald Trump was one of the more deserving celebrity inductees into that Hall of Fame, which you can't really argue that fact.
No, I would agree. I would argue most of the celebrity things you're like Mr. T. Mr. T should be in the Celebrity Hall of Fame. It made sense because of the rock and wrestling connection. Like, of course that made sense. There's sometimes that just like, yeah, I guess that person is a celebrity, and I guess they did stuff. Whatever. They have to give it. They need to give it to Dick Ebersol. Like, come on, put Dick Ebersol in the celebrity wing on the Hall of Fame. That is long overdue.
I won't say that this is a WWE exclusive. I remember when David Arquette won the WCW title.
Sure.
And I've
interviewed him about that.
We do have to wrap up soon because you've got a hard out, correct?
I can stay a little bit longer.
Okay. Let's hear the clip of you interviewing.
Sure, yeah. So this
Trump.
is backstage at Madison Square Garden. This is the night that he was being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And he was just there backstage, and I kind of had no fear. And I went right up to him, and I asked him a few questions about what the night meant to him.
WrestleManias 4 and 5 in Atlantic City. Could you ever have imagined WWE could become this global powerhouse that it is today?
It's been amazing, absolutely amazing, and it's a great honor for me to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, just an amazing experience.
When you had the Battle of the Billionaires match, what would have happened? How devastated would you have been if you had lost, if Bobby Lashley had lost that night, and we would have seen those famous locks disappear?
I would not have been a happy camper. So fortunately, Bobby came through, but I would not have been too happy.
And for all your accomplishments, where does this Hall of Fame induction tonight?
Well, this is one of the great things for me. I really enjoy it, and it's really a great honor.
So that's it. It was real interesting. He was actually very nice. A quick little inside info. So also being inducted that night into the Hall of Fame was this legendary wrestler Bruno Sammartino,
right?
Who was sort of, if your listeners don't know, and I would guess that they don't, Bruno Sammartino was sort of the Hulk Hogan of the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. And he was being inducted by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And because they had known each other in their bodybuilding days.
Yeah.
So right after that interview with Trump is finished, that was about 45 seconds, we turn around and there's Schwarzenegger. And I had never met Arnold Schwarzenegger, but say, oh, Mr. Trump, do you know Mr. Schwarzenegger? And they looked at each other and they walked right towards each other and they shook hands. And it was this really, and a photographer from WWE's backstage snapped a photo, and that photo sort of became a famous photo a few days later when it was posted online, because it was this very interesting thing. Trump was rising in Republican politics at the time as a part of the BS birther movement,
right.
And here was Arnold, this governor, this Republican governor of California, meeting for the first time, and they shook hands, and I'm standing there in the background. I've got like I'm in my little suit, and I've got my hands kind of crossed in front of me, and I'm sort of in the shadows in the background of this now famous photograph, and it was a crazy thing, and that was one of my more fun nights, honestly, working at WWE.
To jump on that just a little bit, it's like I can always understand. I'm not giving them a pass when it comes to these things, but I do understand that they're trying to appease all these different kinds of wrestling fans.
Yeah, and that's something I
also
haven't considered.
Make new fans. So, like, I mentioned very briefly Total Divas, which is an e-show that follows around a bunch of female wrestlers and managers, and, like, is a show you would find on E, right? So it's catfighting and all that. Very little wrestling happens, and it's, like, taped and stuff, and then it became Total Bellas, which are the Bella twins, like... One's recovering from surgery, and so her sister and her sister's husband and another guy all move into John Cena's house, and it's like contrived and stupid.
And she's like, one Bella is married to John Cena, and the other one's married to Daniel Bryan.
Dating John Cena.
Nicole and John are not married.
Okay, so they're dating.
Yeah. So it's this kind of not reality. It's less reality than wrestling is somehow. But it's this interesting thing where there are people that I know who are like aren't avid wrestling fans, but know these names. They know this, like, it's like, oh, well, Eva Marie, and I'm like, wait, what? What's happening right now? How do you know Eva Marie? And it's like, oh, because you watch Total Divas. And not saying all those people are going to go and watch wrestling, but if you can tell them that, oh, well, have you watched Ric Flair's daughter wrestle? like she's great. Have you watched Bailey? Because
Who's Ric Flair's daughter?
Charlotte. She goes by Charlotte, just Charlotte, but Charlotte Flair as well.
Wasn't she in that first women's Hell in a Cell match?
Yes, she was in the first
one, right?
Yeah, she was just in the Hell in a Cell. Charlotte is one of Ric Flair's children and went through the NXT program and is part of this revolution that women's divisions had. But I will say that
Pat Baer buying a lot into the branding.
I'm buying into the branding. I didn't say
this whole
I didn't
episode
say
is about the
Divas
branding.
Revolution,
Yeah.
but I am saying that they are part of this wave of women's wrestling went through a period where it didn't exist in WWE. You had to watch WCW for it. It came back. It became models. A couple of those models became good wrestlers. Most didn't. It went away again. And then it was there as a sideshow. There was a year where I think there were more bra and panties matches on pay-per-views than just a title match.
Yeah.
And it's in a resurgence now. There are a couple that have been around for a bit that are now the focus, and there's good women's wrestling. But I would say someone like Bailey, who is now on Raw, that became very popular in NXT, is a character that I'd be like, I think you'd like Bailey. Is like someone, and in the same way that there are wrestlers that I can tell people like, I think you'd like this wrestler. I think this, even if it's just like Roman Reigns is a handsome man. He's a very handsome man with tattoos and is a muscle-bound good guy with they put fucking blue contacts in his eyes so he's more appealing.
Isn't he the curb stomp guy?
No, that's Seth Rollins had a move called curb
gotcha.
stomp, which he doesn't do anymore. He inherited the pedigree from Triple H.
Oh wow! Is Triple H retired?
He's not an active. He doesn't wrestle that much, but he will come out and punch people, and he has wrestled. He certainly has wrestled.
I would call Triple H at this point a special attraction.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
He'll come and he'll wrestle a couple times a year in sort of these bigger scenarios. But Pat talking about
Like The Rock will.
more than The Rock, but
Right.
yes. But Pat talking about the women, I would say if there's one thing I can point to that says this is why you need to watch wrestling right now, probably would be the women. The WWE is being relatively progressive in that way right now. But, you mentioned before that, this show is about the branding. I would disagree with that. If you are watching wrestling to buy into the branding, you're doing it wrong. You should not have to buy into the branding.
Okay, so what mentality should I have?
You
when
should
watching?
not have to buy into the branding to like something. Ideally, you'll watch every now and then, you'll flip on Raw or you'll flip on SmackDown or you'll watch one of the pay-per-views and some personality or some match will catch your eye and that will draw you in, right? Not so much.
Sounds like that siren just sounds, well, for a while it was sounding like a crappy toy ray gun. I have to call it out.
Or laser tag.
Yeah.
Look, watching an episode of Monday Night Raw for 3 hours is essentially
It's a lot, yeah.
It's essentially a variety show, and you're not going to like everything. You're not going to like both the choreographed dance and the barbershop quartet, and then the stand up. Right? You're going to like a couple of the things, and you're going to dislike a lot of it. And something that WWE does not do well is something that I know you told me before we started recording that a lot of your listeners are improvisers, and something that you're taught in improv very early on is to play to the top of your intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that wrestling, especially the WWE, does not do well.
No.
They really think that they know their audience is a dumbed down audience, and they think they have to be very deliberate with their language and really kind of speak down and condescend to their audience. So a lot of the wrestling that you watch is not going to be great. You're going to be upset by it. You're going to be frustrated by it. That's just how it is. But what wrestling is about, and I mentioned it before, is these moments. Hopefully, you're pulled in by some element of the variety show. You become attached to that personality or this rivalry or something like that. And I'm deliberately not naming specifics because I don't think the specifics are important, right? I can't tell you, you got to watch this guy, Sami Zayn, right? Because I don't know if you're going to like Sami Zayn.
Yeah, no. But meanwhile, I like certain aspects of like Team Hell No when that was going on with Kane and Daniel Bryan.
So that was an
ridiculous
act
team.
that pulled you in. And it grabbed you, right? But wrestling ebbs and flows.
It does.
You're not going to have Team Hell No forever. It's going to ebb and flow. Hopefully, you find something that will draw you in, and hopefully, and it doesn't always pan out, it will lead to one of these so-called moments that you will remember and you can relive on YouTube forever and forever.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah. You know what? I would say, real quick, I 100% agree with that. I named some names that are current people that I like or for different reasons. But yeah, the thing about WWE is that, like, Raw's 3 hours. You might not like, I never liked the Nitro girls. There was nothing appealing about, they're dancing in the ring right now. I was like, when are they going to wrestle?
I'd forgotten completely about the Nitro girls.
But yeah, you might not like this comedy piece. You might not like this drama. You might be tired of this storyline. You don't care about this belt. But there's the thing when wrestling is great, it's these forces and these interesting stories. And then if you're also into the technical aspect of it, there's always somebody there that's a very good wrestler.
Yeah, and now that we're winding this down, I'm just remembering all these moments that did capture me. I loved the rivalry between The Rock and the Hurricane. That like those few promos were hysterical. That was amazing.
See, now I don't know what to recommend to you.
That's
Aaron.
fine.
I mean, Hurricane Helms is an interesting
he was a ridiculously
sideshow
dumb character, but him going up against The Rock was just this wonderfully one-sided thing of very Tom and Jerry-esque almost.
And when Jericho kept calling out Goldberg on Goldberg's Rise, and you're like, man, don't do that. That sounds stupid.
Yeah.
And it was like this, there are times where those kinds of. I mean, right now there's a indie wrestler that James Ellsworth. The gimmick is that he's just a no-name indie guy that is beating the champion. And it's hilarious, or not.
See, Pat and I have very different techniques of telling you what to do to like wrestling.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He keeps naming these guys or things that are happening now on the shows. I'm not going to do that because they might not be here tomorrow, right? If you want to like wrestling, go on the WWE Network. It's $10 a month. Watch some of the greatest matches of all time in HD. Watch some of the greatest promos of all time. Watch some of these storylines unfold that you loved watching, or maybe you've never seen them before, and they can pull you in, and then you start to love wrestling, right? And when you have that bug, then you're like, you know what? I'm going to watch Raw this week. So I want to watch some wrestling. I want to see what's going on.
Do they offer a free trial month?
They do.
Yeah.
Then maybe I'll
They
do that.
So you can do that. And then once you have the bug, you watch an episode, you get attached to a guy, and suddenly you're a wrestling fan again.
Now, to wind things down, if I started out this episode feeling at a 5 about WWE, you guys have brought up a lot of good stuff. I'm talking about it has brought back things to the forefront of my brain. Wrestlers I loved, matches that captured me.
Nostalgia is a really big part of being a wrestling fan.
It very much is. And if the fact that it is becoming more progressive and not treating women as sexual objects, but also as like actual wrestlers now, that's really comforting. All right, then I think that we'd say that I'm down to maybe a 2 or 3.
And honestly, that's where most wrestling fans are anyway.
They just can't quit.
It's that thing where you're just like, oh, wrestling's bad again, and I'm gonna watch Survivor Series. I
remember having that feeling.
There's a couple good matches in Survivor Series. I'm not gonna watch it live. I'm gonna be at work, but I'm gonna watch it. That's kind of where wrestling fans are at.
Well, guys, thank you for coming on. Pat, do you have anything to plug?
So I have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/PatBaer, PATBAER, because I do a show, as mentioned up top, called 404ing It, which is a panel comedy show about the best parts of the internet. I say it's like Tosh.0, but nice is the tagline, sort of. And my Twitter's Pat Baer. I do comedy wrestling stuff here in New York and other comedy things throughout the year. That's about it.
Wonderful. Zach, do you have anything to plug?
You can follow me on Twitter at Zach Linder, ZachLinder. I tweet about pro wrestling. I tweet about pop culture, all kinds of things. Every now and then I try to be funny, and sometimes I succeed, and sometimes I fail. I also have a SoundCloud where I post a lot of my old interviews with wrestling talent, and I sometimes tweet those out as well. So you can look for that. And I've got a wrestling podcast coming out with my buddy Andrew Goldstein, also a former writer for WWE. That's going to be called The Future Endeavors, and it's going to be a look behind the curtain of what really goes on behind the scenes in WWE by 2 former writers for the company.
And when will that be out?
TBD.
All
TBD.
right.
But we've
So
got a
keep checking
studio
into
and we've got some good guests lined up, and it's going to be a very interesting look at pro wrestling.
Wonderful. I'd like to plug, as always, the show Grant and I run together. Grant, our wonderful co-producer for this show. You Are Not Alone, an uplifting show about depression, the last Friday of every month at the Magnet Theater here in New York.
That show's also about wrestling, right?
In many ways, yeah. Wrestling with various things. I'd also like to plug an upcoming show I'm doing because as much as you guys are wrestling nerds, I'm even more of a comic book nerd. And Sunday, December 18th at the Magnet Theater at 6 p.m., myself and several other improvisers are going to be reprising our roles as various Avengers for the Avengers Christmas special. I play Thor, and we'll be doing a show with a hilarious punk parody band called My Dark Little Corner. If you've never checked out My Dark Little Corner, can't recommend it enough. Guys, tweet us, check us out on Instagram and all that. Don't Mind Podcast. You can also email us at don'tmindpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to check me out, I'm Hey, it's Aaron Gold at Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. Thank you guys so much for coming on. If you leave us a review on iTunes, I'll read your name along with something that I like about you. Thank you all so much, and keep on minding.